Welcome back to another episode of Thought Behind Things. आज हमारे साथ मौजूद है एक बहुत ही खास मेहमान who used to be in school with me around 12 years ago. We've known each other for 14 years. Damn, that's quite a lot of time. But we have with us Zarina Tariq, who is an empowerment coach based out of Toronto, Canada. She was visiting Pakistan, so मैंने सोचा कि let's just try to understand what empowerment coaching means and what is it that she does. Zarina, thank you so much for being part of the show.
Thank you for having me.
Acha, tell me a little bit about, so we're going to get towards empowerment. Coaching is a very, very different sort of a field that you've sort of gotten into, and I think definitely growing at this point in time, but unique in its own right. But we're going to get into it. मैं थोड़ा सा ये समझना चाहूँगा. You grew up in Islamabad?
Yes.
What was early life like for you?
Early life. So I grew up in Pindi, actually, before Islamabad. Yes.
Satellite town?
No, Rawalpindi, Westridge.
Acha,
yes.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So that was my life before I met you, Muzamil. I was in Westridge till about grade 3.
Right.
And then after that, me and my family, so my sisters and my mom, we moved to Islamabad. And after that, I moved into a new school, so Beacon House Margala campus.
पहले कौन सा स्कूल था?
Same Beacon House.
वो जो है क्या नाम है?
It was the Peshawar Road branch.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you moved to Bagla.
Yes. So it was a big change for me because I was moving from a school where I knew everybody's names. The headmistress and the principal knew everybody by name as well, including me. And I suddenly, moved into Margala campus where...
And Margala is huge.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Like, it was really overwhelming at first. So yeah, I moved there. And then I've been in Islamabad since... till 2010, until I left for LUMS for university.
Growing up in Islamabad, what was that like? How would you describe it?
How would I describe it? I would say it was a nice, cozy vibe, all in all. Because it's so small, you know everybody. Even if people are in different schools, you know them. So you just feel like the sense of community and the sense of belonging. At the same time, it's kind of a double-edged sword. So, sometimes...
Because you know everyone, though,
exactly.
It's just like घुटन हो जाती थोड़ी सी आपको.
Yeah.
Do you think Islamabad is as burger as it's claimed to be?
Oh, wow, that's a difficult question. Given that I've lived in Islamabad till 2010, then I lived in Lahore for 4 years, and then I lived in Karachi for 4 years.
Acha,
yeah.
4 years in Karachi?
Yes.
You were there for quite a while.
Yes. So, there's a definite, you can identify an Islamabadi when you meet him or her. Just, I guess, by the way they speak, I wouldn't call it an accent, but it's just a different kind of way of speaking. Like just the same way that if you meet a Karachiite, you'll know they're from Karachi.
Yeah.
It's just like that. Even Lahoris, very similar. And I'm married to a Lahori, so you can tell that he is from Lahore, and you can tell that I'm from Islamabad. So I feel like you can tell the difference, but in terms of how burger they are or they aren't, I think there is a slight, more, what's the word? We do live in a kind of bubble in Islamabad. When I went to Lahore, तो मेरी दुनिया थोड़ी खुल गई थी.
अच्छा.
थोड़ी सी खुल गई थी. And most of the friends I made were from, Karachi and LUMS and stuff.
अच्छा, this is very interesting because a lot of times, particularly, BMI की मिसाल लूँगा, जहाँ से मेरे friends आ रहे थे लाहौर LUMS गए थे. And they end up making a lot of these Karachi friends. Why do you think it's that happens? कि इस्लामाबाद के लोग जाते हैं and they seem to connect with Karachi a whole lot more than they seem to connect with Lahore initially.
I agree. Totally. And in LUMS, it's funny because I made absolutely zero Lahori friends. And I made only Karachi friends because very few people went from Islamabad. And since the city is so small and the few people that probably went from Islamabad, I wasn't already friends with because of whatever reasons they may have been. So Karachiites are more warm and welcoming, and I think the clique culture isn't as dominant. I mean, this is my perception from back when I was in LUMS. Based on
your own experience. And
yeah. And also, I think a really important factor in LUMS was that Lahoris were mostly day scholars, and Karachiites and Islamabadis were hostelites.
Right.
So when you're living, practically like living with each other day and night, you're in the, on the premises of the campus and stuff. So obviously...
आपका सारा वो experience ही शाम के वक्त, रात के वक्त, late night, उस तरह हो रहा होता है,
exactly.
दोस्तियां भी उसी वक्त होती हैं.
Yeah.
And going from Islamabad, like high school, say suddenly going to university, you mentioned that, your bubble sort of burst and you opened up.
Yeah.
What was that like? What exactly happened? Yeah, what did you experience that helped you? क्योंकि हम तो BMI में तो बहुत ही गंदे बबल में होते थे ना, हमें लगता था बस यही दुनिया है. बट जाहिर है कि उसमें पूरी दुनिया तो नहीं, बट पूरे पाकिस्तान से लोग आ रहे हैं, सारा कुछ है. So what was it like? What did you experience in university?
I feel like, so for me in school, I was always the parhaku bacha. So I was always this overachiever and I needed to be top of my class. I think we'll talk a little bit about that later as well. But it was this need within me. I don't know at the time where it was coming from. Ki bas I need to be the best.
Right.
No matter what subject it is, everything, I just need to be the top.
थोड़ा सा भी up and down हुआ तो anxiety शुरू हो जाती है.
हाँ. मतलब हो ही नहीं सकता कि मेरी 99% आ गई, किसी और का 100% आ गया. Like, why? What went wrong?
Yeah.
So when I got into LUMS, it was a big bubble burster for me because
everybody was smart.
Everybody was smart. And plus, on top of that, like getting a B and a C and a D was just like, okay. So I really had to get used to that. And then on top of that, university is the semester system. So you're constantly having all of these assessments and stuff.
Yeah.
Jabke OA levels mein to aap like aakhir mein exactly, as you would know.
Yeah.
So that was a big bubble burst for me ke, oh my God, I'm constantly getting judged. Like even there's like class participation marks. There's even like these tiny assessments worth 5% of my grade. And like, I didn't even know it was happening and it's happening now.
Yeah.
And everybody was just, not everybody, but a lot of people would just kind of take it in their stride. And for me, it was just like, oh my God, I'm not prepared. I need to go and study for this or something like that. So us lihaz se it was a major shift for me. Another way it was a major shift was that there were so many people. And being in Islamabad, I think we had gotten out of practice of like making friends from different backgrounds, different cultures, meeting new people. And so that was a big shift.
Islamabad का ये बड़ा problem है कि there's essentially not a lot of variation in terms of your class, right? So mostly you'll find people, job पेशा, bureaucrats, army, ये वो, very powerful people, very upper middle class, but ना आपको बहुत ज़्यादा elite मिलता है, ना आपको बहुत ज़्यादा मिडिल क्लास या लोअर मिडिल क्लास मिलता है, बिकॉज ऑफ द वे दैट सिटी इज स्ट्रक्चर्ड एंड इट्स द वे दैट द फाइनेंशियल सिस्टम वर्क्स, राइट? सो इट्स नॉट लाइक कि एक F10 है और फिर उसके बाद एक G10 है जहाँ पर सडनली मिडिल इनकम रह रही होगी, उसमें ज़्यादा डिफरेंस नहीं होगा. एंड सो यू विल बी एबल टू, एटलीस्ट जो मेन सिटी इस्लामाबाद है, you find people who are very similar to you in terms of what their parents are doing or how much money they make. And वो उस टाइम पे हाई स्कूल में हम देखते थे कि यार इसके पास ज़्यादा पैसा है. जब आप रियली देखते हो, अगर उसको होलिस्टिक लेकर जाते हो, they're very similar. And it's universities where you're able to sort of see that variation and a bunch of different sets of people coming in.
Absolutely.
Did you LUMS के अंदर generally what's the ratio between OA levels and FSC?
I would say majority is OA levels, and minority would be, like, as far as my understanding goes, would be FSC, and mostly the FSC would be yeah. Right.
ठीक है. So you went to LUMS for 4 years. You did economics, I believe, from there.
Yeah.
क्या GPA था?
क्या GPA था? Oh God. I used to get roasted in PNG for having this GPA, by the way, but it was a 3.96.
मैं हाई अचीवर थी, मैं लम्स गई और मेरा बबल ब्रेक हुआ. मैं भी वेट कर रहा था कि अच्छा, तो वहाँ पर जाके मैंने छोड़ दिया. एंड आई वाज लाइक नहीं, वहाँ पर भी 3 पॉइंट. माय गुड लॉर्ड, हाउ आर वी फ्रेंड्स? आई हैड अ 2.2 I think graduating.
But the anxiety skyrocketed, right? Like that was the big shift.
Yeah, makes sense. And so you graduated, you went to again like standardized, graduate high school, go to LUMS, graduate LUMS, go to Anglo, PNG, Unilever.
Basically.
Coke, maybe.
Yeah.
And so you ended up in PNG. What were you doing there?
What was I doing there? I was doing market research, consumer and market research.
Right. And for that you moved to Karachi.
Yes.
4 saal you were doing this, and eventually you moved to Dubai.
Yeah.
What were you doing Dubai में आप PNG में ही थी?
No, I was with Reckitt. Yeah.
What was that position?
That was in marketing. So I made the switch from consumer and market knowledge. So more from like, having a back seat in terms of strategy and having more of a consultancy role to more of a front role, like marketing, execution.
So expand on this. Jo PNG ka role tha, what is that like? What's the job there, essentially?
The job there was actually really interesting. For the most part, I did really enjoy it. If I were to ever, work in the FMCG world again, which I don't see happening really, so I would like to work in, market research because it's basically, it was a consultancy role, like an in-house consultant.
Right.
And I used to partner with the sales organization, top management, and also the marketing organization. And based on researches that we would do ourselves or that we would get commissioned by other research agencies like...
So, for example, like focus groups and...
Quant and qual. So qualitative and quantitative both, which would, we would get commissioned. So uske basis pe strategy kya banani hai? Because you need to know the brands, you need to know the consumer inside out. The marketing and the sales teams wouldn't know the consumer that well. Right. Obviously, because they were in their own seats and in their own work. But my department used to come in and basically make those recommendations of, ke, acha, theek hai, you're pricing this too high or too low, or, the promotion is not understandable to the consumer, so they're not going to buy it. But the part that I loved the most about this role was the consumer in homes and the visits that we do.
Achha, you do that?
Yeah. We did that with agencies, of course. Like we had moderators and stuff, Ipsos ke saath, Nielsen ke saath, and so on. But we would go and, like Lahore, Karachi, Islamabad, across, we would do like through different SECs. We'd do like various in-homes and the kind of like learnings. And, we'd go into their homes, right? Yeah. And like sometimes even spend the entire day with them, watch them washing clothes, watch them like, sit with their children.
Really understand how do they react to products that are coming from your company, essentially.
Yeah.
Right. Interesting. And so you would provide these recommendations to these teams? Yeah, would you build the strategy and then they would work on that strategy?
So both.
Achha.
Pretty much, yeah. So it used to be like, kind of, you'd have to convince them also, because a lot of the times they'd be gung-ho about a certain thing.
Buy-in basically important hota tha.
Of course, yeah, because at the end of the day, they were the decision makers.
Right.
But having them, on board, so having them on board was really important. But thankfully, like in a company like P&G, they gave my department, which is called CMK. Now I think it's called something else. I don't know. So they gave us a lot of importance,
right?
Because they knew that all of our brands and all of our strategy is very consumer centric.
Yeah.
A lot of brands and companies kind of forget that, and they go only down the route of like listening to the CFO of the company. But like our department was quite influential.
And essentially what's happening here is it's a lot of decision making through data, right? If I understand this correctly. So this is basically the department, wo kehte na, data is the new oil. So this is the department that is supposed to be the superstars of the future, essentially. Agar wo dekhe, kyunki purane waqton mein to shayad wo itna zyada nahi seriously lete honge, but I think for companies of the future, of even present and future, these are the departments that are going to drive most of the business decisions because of just the sheer amount of data available and sort of targeting your customers accordingly.
Yeah. Absolutely.
When you move to Dubai, I feel like P&G ka apna ek program hota hai jisme you can sort of switch to a separate vote. Why didn't you switch?
So I ideally wanted to switch, and it was just taking too long because obviously, a lot of people want to switch from Karachi to Dubai. It's usually the natural progression also.
Right.
But those days there was a change in top management. There was just so many pieces of the puzzle that needed to come together for my move to actually happen. It took quite a while. Like it took, I don't even remember how long, but 6 months to ho chuke the.
Right.
Then I got married. My husband was already based in Dubai, so I decided कि अच्छा ठीक है,
what am I doing here?
What am I doing here? But also, more importantly, I hated Karachi. I'm sorry for any Karachiites watching this, but as a single girl living in Karachi, it was probably the most unsafe city for me to live in.
Just to put it out there, देखिए हमने पहले स्टार्ट में माना है कि इस्लामाबादी बर्गर होते हैं और बुरे होते हैं और हमने ना वो चीज़ें मानकर अब हम ये बात कर रहे हैं, थोड़ा सा वेटेज वहाँ पर दे दीजिएगा. But yeah, so to expand on this, single girl living in Karachi, what do you mean by that?
So I didn't live alone in Karachi. Right. Obviously, so my family is based in Islamabad. Right. So I had to look for a place all by myself. Look for a place all by myself. And P&G, while they give you relocation allowance and all of that, so all of that is great. So you're more than comfortable.
Right.
But there's just not any options which you feel like, okay, I would like to live here. you know. So you're not going to get a house for yourself, obviously, because you're one person, and then you're looking for roommates or like flatmates as well in a place where, you know, you may not have any friends. So मेरे जितने कराची के दोस्त थे वो तो घर पे रह रहे थे अपने अम्मी अब्बू के साथ. So I'm looking for apartments. I dealt with a couple of horrible landlords, like horrible, some of which even kind of threatened to kick me out. Literally, like, I'm going to send you your notice and you better like pack your bags situation. And, you know, just normal facilities, utilities used to be such a big problem over there. Like garam pani, 4 सालों के लिए garam pani नहीं आया. Like I've gone to Muzamil. I have gone to a colleague's house at 8 o'clock in the morning because मैंने रात को सर में तेल लगाया हुआ था. And पानी नहीं था.
पानी था ही नहीं. Warm shower तो दूर की बात है. पानी नहीं था.
So
तेल समेत कॉली के घर जाकर.
And by the way, I wasn't very close to her, but I just knew she lived very close by. So I was like, listen, I'm taking Kareem and coming to your house.
Wow.
So
अगर मेरे साथ कोई ऐसा करे तो I'd be like
what the hell? Exactly. Islamabadi burger, ladies and gentlemen.
I mean, Islamabad का ये कि it's not that we're not good friends. We just take our time to really sort of get to know a person, and when we're friends with them, तो हम फिर we last.
Yeah.
बाकी बड़े शहरों में, मैं किसी का नाम नहीं ले रहा, बड़े शहरों में मैंने ये भी देखा कि दोस्ती तो बहुत आराम से होती है, बट फिर उसी के साथ साथ गीबत भी चल रही होती है, और वो जरा इधर ये बात उधर वो. बहुत इस्लामाबादी जनरली मुश्किल से दोस्ती करता है, बट कर लेता है तो तरीके से ही करता है.
Yeah, I like that.
So that's interesting. So I'm going to switch towards your personal life. You mentioned early on, and I don't know if you don't want to talk about that's fine, but you mentioned your mother and your sisters moved to Islamabad.
Yeah.
Why wasn't the father in the picture?
So when we moved from Pindi to Islamabad, that was basically, it happened because we moved out of the house.
Okay.
Basically. So yeah, I've been raised pretty much like ever since 3rd grade by a single parent, and she's a superstar.
And is she working? Has she worked?
She hasn't worked. No, she didn't work. She was basically in a full-time job of like raising four children.
Girls, yeah.
4 girls, exactly. And thank God she had the support of her family, and she had like, you know, some assets and so on to kind of support
sustain
her.
And make sure कि वो जो social mobility वो downwards ना slow कर जाए.
Yeah.
How do you think that impacted you? Because 3rd grade is a pretty conscious state of mind. It's not just like बचपन में होता है तो पता भी नहीं लगता. You know, how did that switch impact you?
In so many ways, honestly. Like, I mean, you must have heard the term that like we are a product of our experiences and what happens to us or what happens around us. And I feel like it's really, really molded me as a person. Until recently, it molded me in the sense that and this is like one of the realizations that I had like when I started working on myself, is that, and we don't have much of a relationship with our father. Like, it is what it is. So I'm just going to call a spade a spade. I don't have much of a relationship despite, you know, some efforts and whatnot. तो नहीं है. And plus I was the youngest of the 4 sisters. So अगर कोई relationship होती भी तो वो बाकियों के साथ होती और मेरे साथ ना होती, because I don't think he really saw me grow up that much. Like I was in 2nd, 3rd grade when it happened.
Which is what, maybe 10, 11 years old?
Yes. Yeah. So I feel like it really impacted my confidence.
अच्छा.
हाँ, like मैं जब सोचती हूँ ना, like I think about the kind of person that I was, the kind of kid that I was when I was in Westridge, Pindi. Muzamil, I don't know if you know this, but I used to be एक annual वो ceremony, prize distribution वाली ceremony नहीं होती Beacon House की, वो होती थी, ठीक है? I think लियाकत हॉल में or something on Murray Road or something. Right. I used to be the star of the play, the annual play, every time, without fail.
Really?
Yes, me.
Wow,
Me.
really?
Yeah. And I was just like this like matlab everybody
animated. Yeah. And being the youngest, I know that youngest generally वो तो मजे में होते हैं ना, because कोई उनके ऊपर restrictions नहीं होती, कोई वो नहीं होता. They're able to really explore themselves.
Exactly. And I feel like that exploration of myself, I feel like that confidence, that, you know, self-esteem, all of that like really came crashing down after this happened. And it happened on a very, like you said, it's a very conscious age, but like it happened very subconsciously, like very subliminally. It's not as if I made a decision कि अच्छा ये हो गया है तो अब मेरी self esteem नहीं है तो अब मैं कुछ भी नहीं करूँगी. You know, it was very like it just happened.
It's like a void that was created and that sort of chipped off on all of that from you.
Yeah. And I feel like now when I look back on it, I feel like I don't blame myself for what happened. I mean, I know that a lot of people do in similar situations, and that's also on a very subconscious level. But I feel like it took away from who I was or what I had to offer. You know, like I feel like it made me less of a person worthy of, you know, when your own father is not involved in your life. तो आपको ऑब्वियसली होता है कि लाइक अच्छा यार 2 ही तो लोग हैं इस दुनिया में जिन्हें लाइक जिनका जॉब एग्जैक्टली जिनकी बस जॉब डिस्क्रिप्शन है कि बस यही है तो उसमें से अगर एक बंदा लाइक जस्ट completely disappears, you obviously, you know, even on a subconscious level, you take it in as, okay, you know, I'm not worth shit. So it did take away from. So when I went into BMI, it was that entire like large scale impact of I'm in such a huge school, nobody even knows my name. I'm completely new. I don't know a single soul. So ek to wo tha, an element of that, or on top of that, it was this void, like you said, within me. So I just kept my head down. That
just sort of made you different than everyone else as well, right? Like everybody else has a standardized. Pakistan mein to ye bahut hi zyada hai. You know, there's a standard expectation of what a family looks like, and suddenly now you don't have that anymore. Couple of things that I'd like to understand. Do you think this inherent need to be a high achiever? So मैं impact देखना चाह रहा हूँ कि potentially 2 areas में जो पढ़ सकता है. एक होगा कि do you think that impacted your understanding of being financially independent, always being secure in your own right, and ensuring कि यार मुझे कि because this has happened to my mother, this मेरे साथ कभी इस तरह का ना हो, and so I've always seen you as very very incredibly independent even back in A levels, right? And do you think that was one of the major reasons that made you that independent person? जिसको कभी भी when girls are very different in Pakistan growing up, they're just like you know, they're girls, so वो अपने आप को as girly वो करेंगे ठीक है यार कोई मसला नहीं है, you know, मुझे help चाहिए, मुझे ये चाहिए, मुझे वो चाहिए, मिल भी जाती है उनको help. But you've always been incredibly independent. Was that just something that was part of your personality, or do you think this is something that drove that idea, okay, listen, I need to make sure that I can do whatever I require for myself, professionally and otherwise?
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head. So I feel like सबसे पहले तो मैं ये बोलना चाहती हूँ कि like it's not just a part of our personality. We're not born with this independence. It's a product of our experiences and our perception of like how we perceive those experiences. So I feel like definitely that made me a very independent person. In fact, I would like until very recently I would just shy away from seeking help about anything. कि मतलब खुद ही करना है. Even if it takes double the time, even if I have the support system, I am just going to do it myself.
Like dependency नहीं हो सकती किसी के ऊपर, because what if they leave type situation.
Exactly. Right? So like what if they leave type situation. Yeah.
And then alternatively also in terms of relationships, and now mashallah so you're married. But do you think that it impacted the way that you saw men when you were looking for a relationship at any point in time? Did that make you worry about the longevity of the relationship or us tarah se? Because I feel like that relationships, मेरे अपने experience में भी, you see your parents and then you build your mind map of what it looks like, right? That's the closest that you have as a reference point. दायरे बड़े बहन भाइयों को भी देख लेते हैं आप, but इतना difference नहीं होता, इतना ज़्यादा detail में नहीं होता. Parents are generally the benchmark. How do you think that impacted your relationship?
I feel like at first I would think that matlab, you know, it didn't. But then when I was like, it wasn't as if I lost all trust in all men. ठीक है, so वो नहीं हुआ. लेकिन once I was in a relationship, anything would happen. ठीक है, any kind of like, obviously every relationship has its share of ups and downs or conflict or whatever. तो उसके जब वो होता था, at the drop of a hat, I would jump to conclusions in my head कि अच्छा ठीक है, this is going to get messed up because यही होना है. Like I think every man in my life basically has, you know is going to blow up somewhere. Exactly. Yeah, it's just not going to work out. Like because I'm probably like, I don't know, there's something wrong with me, which is why like all the men in my life like turn out like this or treat me this way. you know?
Yeah.
And then the more you think it, the more it happens. And then it's like a vicious cycle, a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because if that's what you're going to expect, then that's what you're going to get. And so on.
And I feel like
so
a lot
forth.
of people really miss that. I mean, for a lot of people, जो relationship में जिस तरह react कर रहे होते हैं, it's a lot to do with, again, what they've seen growing up. And I feel like a partner's role is incredibly important in really sort of giving you that safe space. Was what in your case do you think you were able to get that eventually led you to get married and be in a happy relationship? How important, or rather इसको इस तरह करते हैं अपना personal experience के बजाय, how important do you think is a partner when it comes to relationships to really help you maneuver through this entire, because जाहिर है कि आपके लिए relationships are much more difficult than for an average individual. And I feel like कि आप जितने भी therapy में चले जाएं, आप 10 चीज़ें और कर लें, it's really boils down to the partner of how they're able to understand you and then react to it accordingly. What do you think?
I disagree.
Acha.
Yeah, I disagree. Of course, it's not as if the partner has no bearing on the relationship, but I feel like it's
unfair to expect the partner to be able to do that for you.
Yeah, they can't.
Right.
After, like, I think that's the recipe for disaster. That's the recipe to a codependent relationship.
Okay, very interesting. So expand on the codependent relationship.
Yeah. So if you start looking to your partner to fix you, or to fix whatever damage that you've been through or whatever experiences that you've been through, I mean, that's not a healthy relationship.
Right,
because your partner is not there to complete you or to fix you. That's your job.
That's an interesting way you put it.
It's your job. By the way, like, I think our relationship, like with me and my husband, we've known each other for like almost a decade, more than a decade now.
Also from Lums, I believe.
Yes, he's also from Lums. So I feel like our relationship has also greatly like evolved over time, and thankfully, you know, what I do also helps in that for both of us. But and both sides need to be willing to evolve and change and to kind of find new ways that better serve them in terms of how to handle conflict and all of that. लेकिन आपके जो issues हैं वो आपने खुद fix करने हैं. Like, that's just as simple as it is. Like, otherwise, if you keep looking at your partner, you're going to start repelling them as opposed to magnetizing them.
Right.
You're going to start filling a void within you through some, like, using somebody else as opposed to actually doing the work on yourself.
And making sure that you're able to, makes a lot of sense.
Because while I said that we are a product of our experiences, like, the second we realize that, like, how our life has impacted or how our experiences have impacted us as human beings, how we are in relationships and all of these things, एक तो self-awareness के साथ मतलब बहुत ज़्यादा evolution आती है, लेकिन उसके ऊपर you start realizing that it's actually in my hands. I get to choose because I'm an adult now. So even when I'm talking about my childhood and how, like, the whole, you know, shift kind of impacted me, so once I realized that, I've realized that it doesn't have to be true. I can change it.
It shouldn't have too much power over me.
Yeah.
And I should be able to sort of take that power back, right?
Yeah.
So flipping the conversation back a bit. You were at PNG for 4 years. You were at Reckitt for how long?
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
And so you had this sort of quintessential corporate journey.
Yes.
And I remember, like I said, कि पाकिस्तान में या तो आप बाहर चले जाएं. अगर आप पाकिस्तान में हैं तो आप पाकिस्तान में ग्रेजुएट करें, आप लम्स चले जाएं. लम्स से जाकर आप ग्रेजुएट करें तो आप किसी भी बड़ी 4-5 नाम हैं उनमें से किसी कॉर्पोरेट में घुस जाएं. उसके बाद आपके नेक्स्ट जंप है जी दुबई चले जाएं. ठीक है. कॉर्पोरेट वाला जो बंदा है उसको पता है वो टिक मार्क्स है. So and then, you know, you're doing all of that. You're a brand manager at, I believe, looking after 3 or 4 markets.
All of Middle East.
All of Middle East.
So, like, I can't even, like, remember all of the names of the countries anymore.
Yeah, because I remember I was talking to, so Unilever CEO was here 3 episodes back, and he told me, like, he became brand manager at the age of, 35? And went to Dubai and was looking after, again, the entire Middle East for a product. And eventually he came back, became VP of marketing, and eventually the CEO of Unilever, right? So I mean, you were just like, essentially, unka path dekhu, you were 3 steps away if you had played your cards right to really hit it big. then you suddenly decide कि यार नहीं, I need to reevaluate what I'm trying to do, and I really need to look inwards and try to reimagine what my life looks like. Before we go on to what you really do, tell me a little bit about that journey, that transition or transformation जो आपके अपने अंदर आया उस टाइम के ऊपर, and what led to that transformation.
Yeah. So like you said, I spent those 4 years in PNG, Karachi. Then I went to Reckitt, made a department switch, a company shift, also, a geography shift. And by the end of those 2 years, I was a mess. Achha. Like, I was an absolute mess.
Why?
I've got to say.
Why?
I was completely burnt out.
Achha.
Completely. मतलब मुझसे सुबह बिस्तरे से मैं उठ नहीं पाती थी. I just couldn't. It was so difficult for me to literally even get myself out of bed by the end of it. It was like I wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemy.
So why do you think that happened? Do you think it was the nature of that particular job? Or do you think there was something where you and that particular position weren't in synergy?
I feel like I'm a strong believer of everything happening for a reason.
Right.
And I feel like going to Dubai and going to Reckitt, the kind of culture that was there, the kind of work environment that was there, the kind of role I was in, it just sped up my entire process, which was kind of inevitable.
Right.
Of leading me to where I am today.
Right.
So I trust that everything happens for a reason. It just kind of sped it up because मैं इतनी burnout हो गई थी कि I was just like, ये तो नहीं हो सकता. I can't carry on like this. My body was like literally rebelling against my lifestyle. I used to be working over 12 hours a day, even on weekends. It was insane. Right? And I feel like a lot of people may also be happy in jobs and be working over 12 hours a day.
Yeah, I mean, I work 12, 15 hours a day and
exactly.
I'm pretty happy.
Yeah.
So that's why my question yahi tha ki was it because of the nature of the job, the nature of the environment or culture, or maybe your lack of synergy with this particular line of work?
It was, at the time, I was really confused and I thought it was all of these and I couldn't understand which one it was. But now I know in retrospect that it was primarily the fact that that job didn't speak to me.
Right.
It just didn't. And neither did PNG, by the way.
Achha.
So I didn't say this to you, but like 6 months into my job at PNG, I literally started questioning कि बस, is this it?
हाँ, क्योंकि पहले तो हर चीज़ डिफाइंड थी ना.
हाँ.
जो अब मैं बार बार कह रहा हूँ कि ये करो तो ये है exactly. और ये टिक मार करके ये ट्रॉफी लेके घर आ जाओ. बट PNG के बाद क्या ट्रॉफी है?
हाँ. लेकिन उसके बाद क्या प्रमोशन की ट्रॉफी है, फिर गाड़ी की ट्रॉफी है, फिर ये वो भी सब कुछ हो रहा था. बट आई वाज जस्ट स्क्रैचिंग माय हेड एंड थिंकिंग, इज दिस रियली इट? बट एट दैट टाइम आई वाज कंफ्यूज्ड बिकॉज Karachi was such a difficult place to live for like a single woman, and was such an unsafe place to live that I thought when I leave Karachi and go to Dubai,
things will be better.
Things will be completely different. I'm going to be in the first world. I'm going to be close to home as well. So, it'll be perfect. So I got to Reckitt with this mindset कि अच्छा नहीं. And even when I was in PNG, by the way, like I used to, when I'd have a conversation with, let's say, my peers or my friends from LUMS who were also in Karachi, they'd just be like, listen, like PNG is the job to have.
Yeah.
You're just being ungrateful. Even if I'd speak to, let's say my mom or my siblings, and they'd say, this is amazing. You're getting an amazing salary. You're getting amazing benefits. I mean, PNG is an amazing employer.
Yeah.
And I would think, acha, theek hai, I'm being ungrateful.
Yeah.
So I didn't listen to my gut. I didn't listen to what my body or my soul was trying to tell me at the time, because I was so convinced कि इतने ज़्यादा लोग were like इस job में हैं और इतने खुश हैं, तो there's something wrong with me for not enjoying this or for not like being happy here. I'm just always going to be like ungrateful in my life. I need to start being more positive. So I kept ignoring the fact that while it may have been a good decision for somebody else, it wasn't a good decision for me. Like I was not accepting my reality or my truth. And I kept denying it. I kept denying it for those 7 years in the corporate sector. So Reckitt jab main gayi, to wo aur bhi zyada it became apparent to me, because I was like, I'm in Dubai now. I'm not in Karachi, so there's no excuse. I'm in marketing. I'm doing these amazing campaigns. I'm shooting ads. I'm traveling to Lebanon, doing shoots, etc. Like, it's amazing stuff. I should be proud of my creations. I should be proud of everything that I've achieved. But I hate it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
And the work culture was tough. It was tough. And Middle East mein generally the work-life balance situation is,
I mean, you go there to work.
You go there to work. Yeah. Basically, आपकी जिंदगी basically काम होती है और आपके सारे दोस्त काम पे बनते हैं और बस वही होता है. तो once I got so severely burnt out that yes, there was the whole work environment piece, but there was also the piece of I actually started looking inwards, like you said, and asking myself questions and not taking it for granted that मैं ungrateful हो रही हूँ. But actually asking myself questions कि अच्छा, is this really for me? Like, this is it. यही ज़िंदगी है. Like, this is it. And I feel like getting a reminder on your mortality also really kind of puts things into perspective.
Yeah.
So I feel like all of those things kind of happened all of those things kind of culminated at that point for me, at the end of those 2 years where I started questioning everything.
Right. And so what did you do next? I mean, how did you get out of it?
How did I get...
I mean, like, it can't possibly be as simple as कि भाई मैं छोड़ रही हूँ job और देखी जाएगी.
Yeah.
You're not that person, right?
Yeah.
So what was the journey towards eventually doing empowerment coaching and all of that?
So I started seeing a coach myself.
Okay.
And
How did you come across one?
A friend of mine actually recommended one. And she had been going, actually 2 friends of ours had recommended, me and my husband's friends, like they recommended, by the way, like, check her out. She's good. We go to her. Now, I had never been to therapy before. I had never been to a coach before. I didn't even know what coaching was at the time.
Right.
Lekin main racket mein thi aur main bas, I was, like I said, couldn't get out of bed in the morning, literally. So I said, okay, So one day I got myself out of bed, finally, by noon or something. And I had that coach's number. And I called in sick to work.
Okay.
Like, sorry, Racket. I called in sick because I was sick.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I went and saw this coach for a session. So I kept once it started, so I kept sporadically seeing this coach for a session every now and then. And while it was subtle and gradual, I could notice a big shift in me starting to question certain things that I had just taken for कि अच्छा बस यही है.
Ignore करके एक डब्बे में डाल के पीछे रखा हुआ था. हाँ.
And I started questioning a lot of things then. I was just like, अच्छा मतलब why am I cribbing about this if why don't I just do something about it?
Right.
Like, who said that I can't do anything about it? Who said I can't change this?
Right.
Who said I can't change this part of me or this part of my personality that I hate so much?
Yeah.
So many things started shifting in my mind कि slowly and gradually I started getting more and more curious and intrigued कि अच्छा ये क्या scene है? Na? And with this coach, I also started doing various exercises to kind of find my purpose. Because I knew that this wasn't my purpose. So I wanted to kind of find कि अच्छा ठीक है, this isn't it, corporate isn't it, but what is it that I actually want to do? Which is something that I also help a lot of my clients in doing. So that's where I started my journey. And one thing led to another. I got to know about a course, a certification in coaching and in Neurolinguistic Programming. I went for that. I took time off. I didn't care if I got it or not.
Neurolinguistic Programming, you mentioned that.
Yeah.
थोड़ा सा expand. We're going to go towards the story again.
Yes.
But थोड़ा सा उसके बारे में expand करें. What does that mean? And what's the science behind it?
So Neurolinguistic Programming was what my coach used to also use kind of, in my sessions. Like, there were some tools and techniques from that. That she used to use, and she also recommended it to me कि ले लो, Now, Neurolinguistic Program is a really fancy name. We call it NLP in short, but it means, neuro, linguistic, the words we speak and the thoughts that we have, and programming. So how to program ourselves for achieving our goals.
Right.
How to program ourselves, how to use certain strategies, really simply put, how to use certain strategies to be able to achieve our goals faster and better.
Right.
So it's almost like, the way I love explaining it is having a remote control for you and your state of mind.
Right.
Literally having, and that was like such a wow factor for me, because I had always been a person who had these emotional outbursts,
Right.
who couldn't keep my emotions in check. Like either I'd be completely numb, or I would suddenly have like this aggressive emotional outburst, or I'd be passive aggressive. So the way that I would handle my emotions up until then was just really messed up. Very messed up.
Right.
And NLP is something that taught me that isn't necessarily how it has to be and how it has to be forever. Like I can actually have a remote control in my hand for myself.
Right.
Yeah.
And so जब ये आपने सबसे पहले coaching ली and then courses लिए, so you implemented that on your own self and you were able to see the difference as well.
Yeah.
At what point did you decide that I'm going to leave my job and get into this full time?
So I was planning to move to Canada. So our, PR permanent residency thing had all come through. So we were planning to move to Canada. At the same time, COVID hit, global pandemic.
Right.
So we were planning to move, and I had told Rekit to kind of shift me to Canada. And whenever I would think about a new geography, new friends, new everything, and I'd think, अच्छा मैं Rekit के साथ उधर जाऊंगी, या I'd look on LinkedIn for any other corporate jobs, and Rekit was pretty open and helpful in relocation, yeah. But it would just make me cringe because I was so done with it. So I didn't want to do. I knew what I didn't want, but it was time to really double click on what I wanted. Okay? I knew what I didn't want. So when I took this certification, I didn't take it with a mindset of, okay, this is what I want to do professionally. I took it with a mindset of, and there were people from like various, some were entrepreneurs, some were HR managers, some were marketing managers in the course with me. So it's just something that can help you generally. You don't need to actually take it as your profession.
Right.
But once I took that course, I started noticing the differences. I kept applying it on me, in my life, in my relationships, in my professional life. So it really sparked an interest. And it was just a very it wasn't like, okay, I've made a decision and now I'm going to do this. It was very like one thing leading into another.
Right.
And just me being open to the opportunities, open to the possibility of it leading into that.
Right.
So at one point, I told myself, "Acha, theek hai." I took another certification as well. I took CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And after I took that, so I said, okay, this means I can potentially start taking clients.
Yeah.
And then I thought to myself, what if it doesn't work out? What will people say? I've spent 7 years in the corporate sector and I suddenly start doing my own thing. What if it doesn't work out?
And even that own thing is not like a ad agency that's providing services to the corporate sector, right? It's completely off base.
Completely.
Yeah.
So, बहुत ज़्यादा, I had a lot of fears, बहुत ज़्यादा doubts थी. And they held me back for a while. लेकिन finally I reached a point कि मैंने बोला कि मतलब करना है तो करना है. I can't, nobody else is living my life for me.
Yeah.
So if I make decisions based on what other people are going to say or think, I'm just going to stay here for another 7 years and hate my life.
Yeah.
And nobody is going to come and save me. That's the bitter truth.
Yeah, makes sense. We're going to dive deeper into that as well. What I want to understand now is, so right now you're an empowerment coach. You exclusively focus on, even though you've done cognitive behavioral therapy as well, and again, NLP ke saath, there are a lot of other areas that you can potentially tap into in terms of therapy or coaching or us tarah se. But what does empowerment coaching mean? And what sort of individuals or rather, what do your clients look like on average? And what do you help them achieve?
So to answer your first question, what is empowerment coaching? It's me facilitating you to help you reclaim your power.
Okay.
ठीक है? In any way. That could manifest itself in many different ways. Now, you could reclaim your power by setting a boundary with your boss.
Right.
Or you could reclaim your power by learning how to effectively communicate. ठीक है कि अच्छा, you're not being aggressive, you're not being passive aggressive, but you learned how to assertively communicate and be clear in your communication. Or you could reclaim your power by stopping certain sabotaging behaviors like procrastination or going after your goals in a more productive way. So many things. Okay? Like the list is endless.
Yeah.
And you can reclaim your power by, in my case, for example, it was reclaiming my power from not being at the mercy of external situations and also not being at the mercy of my emotions and letting them control me and run my life. And then feel guilty and sad about it later. Ki, shit, yaar, I shouldn't have said that. Yeah, I shouldn't have done that. So that is what empowerment coaching is. Like, मैंने बहुत ज़्यादा सोचा था कि अच्छा ठीक है, I want to call myself a life coach. I want to call myself a coach. So I went through quite a few iterations, but the one that really, spoke to me in terms of what I did for myself, what I was able to do with the help of a coach in my own life, and what now is my purpose of helping others do in their lives, was just reclaiming their power and hence empowerment coaching.
Makes a lot of sense. How does it work? Is it like sessions or is it like a class or what? How does it work?
Yeah. I didn't answer your second question though.
Sorry.
I just remembered. How do my clients, like what does my average client look like? You were asking. So most of them are from Pakistan or the subcontinent,
Right.
And they're usually located abroad, so a lot of expats, so people who are very similar to me. And I feel like that really makes a difference because it's so important to, like, anybody watching this, like, it's so important for you to click with your therapist or coach or whoever it is that you're seeking support from. It's so important because the words coming out of somebody's mouth who clicks with you, you're going to listen to and are actually going to, make an impact. Like in the same words coming out of a person who you don't really click with is just not going to.
Yeah, and then there is a cultural thing and वो सारा का सारा ना जो कि आपको for जो आपके similar culture वाले coaches होंगे, they'll have a lot of understanding of the nuance where you're coming from.
I've gotten a lot of clients जिसमें expats, जिसमें they've either gone to certain therapists or certain coaches in Canada, in Europe, in North America as well, and they're just they say कि उनको समझ नहीं आती कि I can't just cut off with my family because they're giving me a hard time. Like that's just not the solution. Like you can't just put a boundary up saying कि sorry, मैं
तो बाहर आ गया हूँ लाफिस.
Exactly. Like it's not an option. In some cases it has to be, but like it's very, it's the last resort.
Yeah.
So having that cultural sensitivity and understanding those cultural nuances is really important. And I feel like it makes all the difference that, I have been in their shoes or I can completely relate with, what they're saying. Which is why, a lot of my clients are also from corporate backgrounds. So when they're talking about, let's say, a difficult conversation with their boss, कि अच्छा ठीक है, या तो promotion या relocation मांगनी है या having a conversation about like I need to talk to you about your management style, it's not working for me,
Right.
So those kind of difficult conversations which are good for you but you're too scared to have or you're too scared that they might go south.
Right.
So that's also what I help a lot of my clients with, because understanding that 7 years in the corporate world has taught me a lot.
Yeah.
And
you were able to see all of those problems firsthand as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Makes sense. मुझे ये बताएं कि so this is something that you're doing full time now.
Yes.
And this is something that you're passionate about as well.
Yeah.
What I'd be most interested in, and this is something जो कि personally मेरा अपना एक personal interest इस वजह से भी है, because this is something that I did straight out of college. I did for a couple of years. I pursued the conventional standardized route of get a job and data is the new future. मेरा जो major था वो data analytics में था. Get a job in data analytics. Easy road है, 3-4 साल पाकिस्तान में काम करो, उसके बाद बाहर चले जाना, बाहर जाके आराम से upper middle American या upper middle Canadian या upper middle European, easy.
Yeah.
And then वही वाली बात कि I at this point in time I work for 15 hours and I don't have a problem, and at that time I would like literally IT jobs, consulting IT jobs, that they're a joke, to be honest. You work for 1 hour a day and you're fine. Like एज ऑफ एम्पायर्स खेलें, आप ये करें वो करें. अगर आप स्मार्ट हैं, आपने तो दिन में सुबह जाके अपना काम कर लिया, आपका काम हो गया है.
चलो, a lot of people watching this know what their career choice is going to be.
But with all of that comfort, I mean, work from home was an easy thing at that time. ये तो पाकिस्तान में तो वो दुनिया में बड़े लोगों को अब कॉन्सेप्ट हुआ है. हम तो उस टाइम पे उठते थे सुबह, नहीं मूड हो रहा, अच्छा चलो यार वर्क फ्रॉम होम. सुकून होता था, अमेरिकन कल्चर था. मैं ना कल्चर को ब्लेम कर सकता हूँ, ना मैं किसी और चीज़ को ब्लेम कर सकता हूँ. हर चीज़ थी, बेहतरीन थी. I didn't want to wake up in the morning. I didn't feel like working at all. And I was just like, क्या मेरी ज़िंदगी. हालांकि growing up, I thought that was exactly what I needed to do. Like मेरा ये होगा, फिर मैं इधर यूनिवर्सिटी जाऊँगा, फिर यूनिवर्सिटी के बाद मैं ये जॉब करूँगा, फिर जॉब के बाद मैं eventually बाहर चला जाऊँगा.
Yeah.
And then I decided eventually, because I'd been toying with these social media situations and right after high school, and मुझे पता था कि अच्छा इसमें I have a certain skill set, I like doing this, and I ended up doing it. And it's not easy, because the voices in your head are one thing, but there's voices around you are constantly like कि भाई ये तू सबसे दुनिया की सबसे बड़ी गलती तू ही करने लगा है. ठीक है, लाइक वो 10 साल उन्होंने आपसे बात नहीं की होगी, किसी की कॉल आ जाएगी, किसी कदर नहीं कॉल आ जाएगी कि यार तू सुने तुमने ये कर दिया, पागल तो नहीं है भाई. And you're just like, and obviously you're constantly second guessing yourself, and you're doing all of that. And alhamdulillah, now that we're at a very different stage in life, and now everybody's like, we always knew you're gonna make it. But
yeah, right.
But वही वाली बात है कि it's not an easy decision.
Yeah.
Even if you've been able to really structure yourself and be able to figure out कि यार this is really what I wanted, वो एक fear of failure होता है, fear of वो होता है कि यार ठीक है, at the end of the day I am just a human being, and what if my mind is playing games with me right now, and सब पागल तो नहीं है ना बाकी सारे जो रेस में लगे हुए हैं. तो मैं क्यों उस रेस से बाहर निकल रहा हूँ, या मैं उस कुएं से बाहर क्यों निकलने लगा हूँ. एंड आई नो नाउ that was a कुआं, एंड उस कुएं के बाहर बहुत बड़ी दुनिया है, बट उस टाइम पे नहीं होता. Did you face that? Because corporate and PNG and Racket, and that's just like, that's gold standard what you had there. And suddenly now you're saying, listen, like,
yeah, okay, it wasn't gold standard for me.
Yeah.
And that's what matters. And it took me 7 years to realize that.
But once it did, you were able to, how were you able to block out? Because I know that a lot of my listeners, फॉर एग्जाम्पल देर लाइक कि वो पाकिस्तान में बहुत सारी इस मज़े की चीज़ें हो रही हैं, डिग्रीज़ के ऊपर हो रही हैं. लॉट ऑफ पीपल आर वर्किंग एंड दे आर एबल टू मेक क्रेजी अमाउंट्स ऑफ मनी, एंड दे डोंट वांट टू परस्यू अ डिग्री दैट दे हैव बीन फोर्स्ड अपॉन, एंड दे वांट टू क्विट फॉर एग्जाम्पल, बट वो नहीं कर पाते. बहुत से लोग जॉब्स कर रहे हैं, उनकी बहुत सारी ऑल्टरनेट चीज़ें चल रही हैं, बट वो फियर होता है कॉन्स्टेंटली कि नहीं यार, हालांकि पैसे आ रहे हैं, बहुत से लोग फ्रीलांसिंग कर रहे हैं, अच्छे पैसे आ रहे हैं, दे नेवर गोना स्विच. वो अभी भी 1 घंटा फ्रीलांसिंग को देंगे, 8 घंटे जॉब को देंगे, या 12 घंटे जॉब को देंगे. हालांकि वो जॉब जो है वो एक तो ड्रेन भी कर रही है उनको पैसे भी कम दे रही है, बट उनको एक फियर है कि ओ माय गॉड, लगी बंदी तो है ना. लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल, यू मूविंग टू कनाडा एंड सडनली यू लाइक कि अच्छा यार मेरी तो एक लगी बंदी तनख्वाह है, डबल इनकम आ रही है. द आइडिया दैट आई हैव टू रियली बिल्ड समथिंग ग्राउंड अप, इट्स डेफिनेटली समथिंग जो कि दिमाग को चिप ऑफ करती है.
Oh, for sure.
एंड सो हाउ were you able to reconcile with that?
I mean, first of all, I want to say that the fears are really real.
Yeah.
Okay? And I'm not going to lie and say I still don't get them.
Yeah.
Because, whenever you're starting off your own thing and you're used to this salary and benefits and insurance.
And the comfort, essentially, the overall comfort जो कि आपको एक पैसे से आया हुआ है, जो कि उन चीज़ों से आया हुआ है.
हाँ, कि अच्छा ठीक है, I've turned off my laptop and now like my work day is over. Even though it generally never used to be, but just,
दिमाग में तो होता है.
हाँ, कि like my manager's manager can deal with the rest of the crap, but now it's just you, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to lie and say the fears still don't come in, but the way that I personally tackled them and keep tackling them is to ask myself what really matters to me. And instead of letting that fear run my life, which it had been for a really long time, to look the fear in the face and be like, अच्छा यार, like ठीक है हो सकता है, it can fail. But I will literally never know unless I try.
Right.
Like I will literally never know unless I try. And that's something that may sound really stupid to somebody who hasn't figured out or who has figured out what's important to them.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of work I do with my clients also कि यार like मतलब क्या जिंदगी का क्या purpose है?
हाँ, वो जब थोड़ी देर पहले बात बोली थी ना कि इट्स रियली द सेंस ऑफ मॉर्टैलिटी दैट यू गेट वेयर यू रियलाइज कि आई एम गोना डाई इवेंचुअली एंड वो फॉर अ लॉट ऑफ यंग पीपल वो जो मिड लाइफ क्राइसिस होते हैं आपको फॉर लॉट ऑफ यंग पीपल दे डोंट वो ये सोच ही नहीं रहे होते, उनको लगता है बस यही जिंदगी है और ये पूरी दुनिया जिंदगी चलती रहेगी. एंड इफ यू रियली थिंक अबाउट यार इवेंचुअली आई एम गोना डाई एंड आई एम गोना I mean it's gonna be a void. Do I really want to spend my entire life being unhappy?
Exactly. And for what?
For what?
Like who am I making happy?
Through this.
Like people are going to say things if you're doing this or something else. People are going to say things regardless of anything. So if I'm going to keep avoiding that and living my life out of fear कि लोग क्या बोलेंगे, क्या सोचेंगे, because मेरे दिमाग में तो बहुत it was very real मुज़म्मिल कि मैं सोची थी कि I've worked with so many people across so many different geographies and they're all on my Facebook and they're all on my Instagram and all of that. And I was scared of setting up my Instagram account. I was scared of putting it out there and saying कि this is what I'm doing.
Yeah, because वो दिमाग में आता है कि वो सोच रहे होंगे कि ये तो पागल हो गई है, she's fallen off the bandwagon, क्या मसला हो गया, ये हो गया, वो हो गया. हालांकि you have it all figured out, but the way that they're going to perceive it, वो वाला fear आपको constantly chip off कर रहा होता है.
Exactly. But just realizing कि you know what matters to me more. What matters to you more? Like just asking yourself those questions that we don't generally ask ourselves.
Yeah, makes sense. We're at the 57-minute mark, and so I tried to wrap things up at 1 hour.
Yeah.
Just quickly and just there's a disclaimer there. This is not a sponsored conversation, but I love the work that she does, and I feel like a lot of times you guys message me, कि you know ये मसला हो रहा है, वो मसला हो रहा है. A lot of the problems that you guys talk about are related to what Zarina is an expert in, and I don't want to give any advice or any sort of solution जिसका सच्ची बात है मुझे नहीं पता. And so quickly before I move on to my last question, if someone had to reach out to you to sort of get an understanding of any of this, what's the best way to do that?
So I'm on Instagram and my handle is coaching with Z. So anybody who wants to reach out, I'm available there and I'm super responsive.
Perfect. Sounds great. Zarina, this is a question I ask all of my guests. You've been in Pakistan growing up. You were in Islamabad for the longest time. 4 years in Lahore, 4 years in Karachi, then Dubai, then Canada. You have a fairly good understanding of a lot of different cultures at this point in time. And usi ke saath zahir you have a lot of family in Pakistan, so that sort of ties you down back to back home as well, even if when you get that passport. How do you see Pakistan 28 years from now, 2050 ka Pakistan, when you would, I would assume, be 60 years old, at the peak of your power? How do you see at that point in time Pakistan based on how you've seen it evolve growing up and the way that you see it today?
So, I mean, I've coached a lot of Pakistani clients and I base this on that and like my social circles and my family who is in Pakistan. And I feel like there is a tremendous shift in the thinking of our community over here.
Right.
And I'm really happy about it because when I coach my clients, I realize that the things that we didn't used to question in our youth, let's say our life choices or let's say certain sabotaging behaviors that we just take for granted or, you know, people have started questioning them. And people want better lives for themselves, for their families, for their children. People are being more mindful. Right. Like just the other day, you know, I was coaching a client and of course, I'm not going to share any confidential information, but like it was a client and, you know, he was mentioning how he had like this huge breakthrough in one of our sessions. And he said, you know, this is so important and I'm going to make sure that, you know, my children don't go through something similar or my children don't have to. So, you know, like that ripple effect is happening and people are becoming more conscious. And I feel like COVID, the pandemic, the lockdown has really, really also contributed to it. And funnily enough, I started my coaching also, like professionally, at around about the same time. So, लोगों को अभी पता चलना शुरू हुआ है कि जिस रट में हम फंसे हुए थे that doesn't have to be our life as we know it. It can be something else. We can start questioning our decisions, our life choices. We can actually make a conscious decision to be more present with our families or be more mindful of the decisions we make and the behaviors that we have, of our health, like so many small things. But people are starting to be more mindful as opposed to just working like, you know, little hamsters in a in a cage.
In a cage, yeah. And I think not just professionally, even I feel like हमारे अगर मैं parents की generation देखता हूँ तो उनको they were given a set of values and they never questioned them and they were like बस ये जी चुप करके करते रहो, बेशक उसके fundamentals पता है नहीं पता, करना है नहीं करना. I think there is a generational disruption that's happening. And that's really going to show itself as the newer generations are going to start popping up. Zarina, thank you so much for taking the time out. I know that you have a flight in a couple of days, and you took the time out for this session, for sharing all the insight. And I'm excited to see where all of this goes and then how many people you end up helping.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Muzamil.
And for all of you guys, thank you so much for watching. अगर आपको एपिसोड पसंद आई हो अपने दोस्तों यारों के साथ ज़रूर शेयर करिएगा. हमने एक नया चैनल स्टार्ट किया, इसको TBT शॉर्ट्स का, TBT क्लिप्स का. आई डोंट नो कि उसका एग्जैक्ट नाम क्या है, बट यू कैन चेक दैट आउट. इट्स अपीयरिंग समवेयर ओवर हियर एंड द लिंक इज डाउन बिलो. उसमें छोटे क्लिप्स होते हैं फॉर पीपल हु डोंट हैव who have too much of an ADHD to go through an hour-long conversation. So you can subscribe to that channel as well. We have started also another podcast called the Pakistan Pivot, where we talk to different government officials, policy makers, just sort of trying to understand what the thought behind some of the major policy decisions in Pakistan or that impact most of us in our daily lives. इसी के साथ साथ यहाँ पर कहीं पर easy पैसा jazz cash आ रहा है, जहाँ पर you can support the channel if you'd like. We accept anything from ₹1 to as much as you'd like. It's the thought that counts. YouTube वाले like का बटन दबाएंगे, engagement बढ़ेगी, ज़्यादा लोगों को हमारी conversation पहुँचेगी. Audio platforms वाले subscribe का बटन दबाएंगे, आने वाली episodes की आपको notification मिलेगी. But anyways, this was Muzamil, Hasan, Zaidi. You were watching Thought Behind Things. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one.